Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1, I call Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it is providing to any people in Glasgow who are at risk of losing their mental health support due to the reported reductions in funding announced by the Integration Joint Board.
Minister Marie Todd.
The Scottish Government and NHS boards continue to support spend in excess of £1.5 billion for mental health services in 25-26. Specifically for mental health, boards were allocated £123.5 million in 24-25 via the Enhanced Mental Health Outcomes Framework, with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde receiving over £27.5 million. This funding, which was being provided in addition to core allocations to boards, is now being baselined, which will give local areas greater choice in how services are configured and organised in order to deliver better, more sustainable outcomes. Decisions around the provision of mental health services are a local responsibility. Services should be planned by integrated joint boards and delivered through a mixture of NHS, local authority and third sector organisations, and the organisation, delivery and funding of mental health services will vary depending on the local population needs and will be guided by clinical decision making.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, the numbers cited by the Minister clearly aren't getting to where they need to be, because I've been contacted by constituents deeply worried by the decision by Glasgow's Health and Social Care Partnership not to renew core funding for Flourish House, a mental health recovery community based in the city's Woodlands district since 1997. Flourish House works on the clubhouse model, giving members a restorative living environment and support for those whose lives have been severely disrupted because of their mental illness. And I think it's appalling that such a successful and well-established place of healing and therapy is now in danger of closure. That is not rational. It is a cost-driven exercise. It's going to disrupt the care of all those who rely on it due to budget constraints facing the Integration Joint Board. So will the Minister join me in raising her concern about this cut to a vital service in Glasgow and work with Flourish House and the Health and Social Care Partnership to find a long-lasting future for this well-established and well-regarded service?
Minister.
So certainly my officials are already meeting with representatives of the Glasgow IGB to understand the financial pressures that the partnership are facing, and it's my understanding that the Glasgow IGB remains committed to protecting and delivering statutory service provision for the people of Glasgow. It's vitally important that we all recognise the very difficult financial context that we collectively face, but in recognition of those difficulties, our funding from government has increased to both health and social care and to our local government partners. I would expect local decisions to be made in consultation with the communities in which they are based and full awareness of the impact on them, and I would expect them to take into account the potential impact on other services which might be asked to step in. I will certainly add the issue that Mr Sweeney raises with me to the list of things that officials are discussing with that particular IGB.
Question number 2, Christine Grahame.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with NHS borders about extending the hospital-at-home provision throughout the borders.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. As outlined in our operational improvement plan, we are committed to expanding hospital-at-home services across Scotland to at least 2,000 beds by December 2026 as part of the £200 million allocated as part of the record £21.7 billion for health and social care this year. Officials are in regular contact with each of the territorial boards, including NHS Borders, support their local planning process, and the expansion of hospital-at-home services should build on the success of services already in place, which we know are delivering positive outcomes for both patients and staff.
Christine Grahame.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his reply. And yes, we both had a visit to the success of hospital at home in the borders, its impact on freeing up hospital beds. Indeed, as of May 2025, NHS Borders has created a virtual capacity of 20 beds. But currently the service, which operates from the base at Borders General Hospital, Neil Melrose, is determined by the ability to travel safely and effectively to patients within the day. So this means that those who wish to use the service in, for example, Tweeddale, are excluded. Is there any way around this, for example, using Hay Lodge Hospital in Peebles as a local delivery centre?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As Christine Grahame references, I had the great pleasure of visiting Borders General Hospital with her last August, where we met the hospital at home team, the Chief Executive and officials from Healthcare Improvement Scotland who have supported the development of the local hospital at home programme, and they were able to describe there the expansion, as Christine Grahame has set out, through an additional nurse practitioner. So the service is now supporting a caseload of 20 patients in recent weeks. We are working with all boards, including NHS Borders, to develop plans for this coming year, continue to grow our hospital at home services. It's our long-standing aim to provide care for patients in the right care at the right time and in the most person-centred way possible. And I will absolutely take away the suggestion that Christine Grahame has made there for her constituents in Tweeddale to see whether her suggestion regarding Hay Lodge and Peoples could be a viable option. And I'll write back to Ms Grahame in order to confirm those conversations.
Question number 3, Alec Crowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the reports that Leonard Fire Station could lose a fire engine and rope rescue unit.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Fire Rescue Service is carrying out a service delivery review to ensure that its fire stations, appliances and crews are in the right place at the right time to deal with the current and future risks in our communities. Following pre-consultation engagement last year, SFRS has developed a list of possible service changes. It is currently undertaking staff and trade union engagement on these proposals in advance of undertaking a full public consultation in the summer, and I would encourage anyone with an interest to engage with that consultation. The SFRS board will then carefully consider the responses in advance of any final decisions being made.
Alec Crowley.
Presiding Officer, staff in Lochillie have been told that they will lose an engine and possibly the rope unit, which is only one of 4 across Scotland. Already in the last 2 weeks, 2,700 people have signed a local petition such as the fear. Lochillie Community Council sent a clear message to the politicians: rather than cutting, now is the time to invest to ensure Lochillie Fire Station has the personnel, equipment and specialist units required to meet the growing challenges in this current climate. To remove the rope and fire engine will increase risk. Will the Minister stop hiding behind operational matters and come to Fife, come to the Cowdenbeath area, meet the people and hear the fears that they have?
Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the member for that. And of course, I'm always happy to go on visits to stations and listen to members of the SFRS. I think we have to be clear that they are currently undergoing staff and union engagement with this, and the final list of possible changes will be subject to public consultation, and it hasn't yet been finalised. It is therefore, I am not hiding, but it is not appropriate for me to comment on individual options at this stage. The SFRS board and the Chief Officer are best placed to take decisions on how resources should be deployed. It would be inappropriate for a minister to direct SFRS on how they should deploy its resources. This is not a cuts exercise. This is about SFRS carefully examining the risks present in our communities and configuring its resources and the best way possible to deal with those risks.
Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I have listened carefully to what the Minister has just said in response to Alec Crowley, MSP, and I'm sure that my constituents nonetheless will remain very concerned to note that she has not in fact ruled out these dangerous cuts to Lochillie Fire Station. Indeed, one of only 4 rope rescue centres in Scotland, and which cuts could of course lead to the very closure of Lochillie Fire Station itself. So I hear that the Minister is happy to visit fire stations. Will she now therefore commit to have her private office today set up a visit to Lochillie Fire Station to meet with local firefighters to hear of their very significant concerns about the considerable risks posed by such cuts to their ability to keep us all safe?
Minister.
Thank you. The changes the Fire Rescue Service are consulting on have been very carefully considered using substantial evidence and analysis of risk. As I said, I am always open to visiting fire stations and hearing direct from those on the front line, and I will speak to my private office about organising a visit. As I set out in my original answer, there will be a full public consultation where everyone will have the opportunity to make their views known.
Question number 4, Stephanie Callahan.
ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide further detail on the approach it's taking to consider the recommendations set out in the independent report Review of Data, Statistics and Research on Sex and Gender, also known as the Sullivan Review.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville.
The Office of the Chief Statistician published guidance for public bodies in Scotland on the collection of sex and gender data in 2021. The guidance recommends that statistics producers should collect data that best serves the needs of users in their specific context. This approach aligns with the 2024 guidance published by the Office for Statistics Regulation. The Sullivan Review recommends that Scottish Government reviews its guidance in light of the recommendations contained within the review, and the Scottish Government has previously committed to reviewing its guidance by the end of 2026.
Stephanie Callahan.
For that answer, and I want to ask specifically about recommendations 2 and 23. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that with recommendation 2 that data on sex should be collected by default in all research and data collection commissioned by government? And she has already commented on recommendation 23, which includes the OSR suggestion that the Scottish Government 2021 guidance for public bodies on the data collection and publication of sex, gender identity and trans data should be reviewed. And how might the Scottish Government support public bodies to confidently collect accurate and legally compliant data on both sex and gender identity? Cabinet Secretary.
I've mentioned, Presiding Officer, in my previous answer about the work that is continuing in the Office of the Chief Statistician. I can also add that the Scottish Government is committing to reviewing its guidance, and the Office of the Chief Statistician is engaged with wider UK work on this topic. The Government Statistical Service Harmonisation Team is currently developing harmonised standards for collecting data on sex and gender identity, and the Office of the Chief Statistician is contributing to this work and will consider its outputs as part of its review of the Chief Statistician's guidance.
Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, biological sex, as we've heard, has been erased in data collection across our public institutions. But this isn't just about integrity of statistics, it's about safety. Recommendation 12 of the Sullivan Review calls for the NHS to stop allowing people to change their gender marker, especially in the case of children, which the review says poses a serious safeguarding risk. Shockingly, this SNP government has already confirmed in writing there are no plans to stop this practice. Will the Cabinet Secretary accept it must now hit the brakes and commit to working with the Minister for Public Health to urgently implement this recommendation?
Cabinet Secretary.
I recognise the work that was undertaken by the independent report, the Sullivan Review, Presiding Officer. I've already pointed to the work of the Office of the Chief Statistician and the wider UK work that is being undertaken. And I think, particularly on sensitive subjects such as this, I do welcome the fact that across the UK, statisticians are looking at this exceptionally seriously. They are looking and continuing with that work as we speak, and it's important that we allow those statisticians to carry on with that sensitive work.
Thank you. We're only halfway through and time is moving on. Be grateful for concise questions and responses. Question number 5, Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support is available to parents, carers and pupils during the stress of exam time.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
Presiding Officer, I recognise that the exam diet can be a stressful time for pupils, and I want to take this opportunity to wish our young people across Scotland the very best of luck as they sit their exams, and particularly to those in Miss Adamson's constituency of Motherwell and Wishaw. Importantly, opportunities should be available throughout the school year for every young person to discuss any stress that they may be feeling as they prepare for examinations, and support around how this can be best managed. Pupils with concerns regarding their exams should contact their school in the first instance. The SQA has also published the Your Exams booklet, which contains helpful information on how to prepare for exams and what to expect.
Claire Adamson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer, and I too wish every pupil well and hope they achieve their ambitions. But does the Cabinet Secretary agree that there is no single path to success, and that it is important to recognise the many routes into careers and fulfilling your ambitions, such as modern apprenticeships, vocational courses and tremendous colleges like New College Lanarkshire in my constituency, who offer articulated routes into career choices?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for her question. I very much agree that there is no single path to success, as the member has alluded to, and it is really important that we do recognise and support the many and various different routes there are into fulfilling careers, whether that's through modern apprenticeships, vocational training or further and higher education. The Scottish Government, of course, continues to invest in those pathways, including supporting colleges like New College Lanarkshire in the member's constituency, and high-quality apprenticeship opportunities. In this financial year alone, we are investing £185 million to support foundation, modern and graduate apprenticeships. Now, our commitment to providing that breadth of choice in the senior phase is also reflected in the ongoing growth of school leavers achieving one or more vocational and technical qualification at SEQF level 5 or better, with 35% of 23-24 school leavers gaining a vocational or technical qualification at SEQF level 5 or above. So these new pathways provide a vital role in equipping learners with skills needed for today's workforce and help to ensure that every learner, regardless of their background, has a chance to succeed.
Question number 6, Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to ensure that everyone living and working in Scotland lives in accommodation that meets an adequate standard.
Minister Paul McLennan.
All homes in Scotland must meet the tolerable standard, and where a home is rented, it must meet either the repairing standard for private rented properties or the social housing quality standard for social rented homes. In my previous discussion with Mr Leonard, we recognise there is a gap in protection for some seasonal workers' accommodation in Scotland, and officials were tasked to carry out scoping work to better understand the full context and potential solutions that could be taken forward. I'm grateful to Mr Leonard for feeding into that scoping work, and I'd be happy to meet with Mr Leonard to discuss this work further.
Richard Leonard.
Can I thank the Minister for that reply? But it took agitation inside and outside Parliament around last year's Agriculture and Rural Communities Act before the Government committed to reviewing the regulation and oversight of tied accommodation for seasonal agricultural workers. Now that it has, when will the Government publish that review, and what urgent and immediate action is the Government taking on the ground for the 2025 season now underway to ensure that seasonal worker accommodation in Scotland is safe and habitable?
Minister.
There are already some standards in place for seasonal workers' accommodation, and current inspection of accommodation is carried out by the farms and industry through the audit system. This obviously involves farms providing extensive evidence online, as well as site visits from auditors, including inspections of accommodation. Further engagement, of course, with this industry will be required to understand how they deal with issues raised with them and how we can improve on those. And happy to pick up these issues with Mr Leonard when we meet again soon.
Question number 7, Emma Roddick.
To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to support and raise awareness of the Health Passport scheme for those with a learning disability.
Minister Marie Todd.
Currently, there is no national health passport scheme in Scotland for people with learning disabilities. Some of the organisations that the Scottish Government fund have developed their own version of a passport. For example, PAMIS, who have pioneered their digital passport. We are continuing work to progress the development of proposals for a learning disabilities, autism and neurodivergence bill. That includes the development of provisions on statutory strategies and guidance and mandatory training, which could be used to support the introduction of a passport scheme for people with learning disabilities in Scotland.
Emma Roddick.
Recently, I joined L'Arche Highland for a cup of tea, part of its Power Cupper series, where people with influence come to speak to and listen to those with learning disabilities. And attendees told me that when a health professional pays attention to their passport, the experience is great. But if they're rude about the passport or make a big deal about how much of a hassle it is, it makes a stressful situation worse. It was very important to them that I raised this directly with the Minister. So what more can be done to raise awareness of existing schemes and make sure that people with learning disabilities and their passports are always treated with the deserved respect in health and social care settings?
Minister.
We know that key barriers to the effectiveness of passports are implementation and uptake, and in addition to the ongoing work via the LDAN Bill, NHS Education for Scotland and organisations funded by Scottish Government to support people with learning disabilities disabilities like PAMIS can help, and social care professionals can help health and social care professionals to develop their knowledge and understanding and support implementation. I'll ask my officials to pick this up with the relevant people.
Thank you. That concludes general questions.